Where we're at right now is just we have to show that we're a good bet and show that we're a good investment and show that we can deliver on the projects that are promised. And, when your light rail trains are breaking down frequently or we have to shut down the system for 2 weeks, it makes it hard for people to want to invest. And so that's kind of really where we're at right now, is prioritizing, showing that look, we can do this. We know how to do it. We know how to invest. And once people see that it works and it's good, trying to then push for more.
Welcome back to Spilling the Tea, the podcast where we take you behind the scenes of the MBTA to share the stories, challenges, and progress shaping our public transit system. I'm your host, Andrew Cassidy of the MBTA's Customer and Employee Experience Department, and today I'm joined by Holly Arnold, Administrator for the Maryland Transit Administration. Every major transit system, including the MBTA, faces pressing challenges. Aging infrastructure, rising ridership, and the constant balancing act between long-term capital projects and today's service reliability. To explore how one of the nation's largest systems is confronting these very issues, I'm joined today by Holly Arnold. From buses and rail to paratransit and commuter services, Holly leads an agency tackling challenges that mirror our own, while also shaping the national conversation on the future of public transit. Join me as we dive into how the MTA is navigating these pressures, what lessons the MBTA can learn, and how leaders like Holly are driving change across the industry. Holly, welcome to Boston, and thank you for taking the time to sit with us for Spilling the Tea.
Thanks for having me. It's so good to be back in Boston, and it is a beautiful day out there.
You are the administrator for MTA, the Maryland Transit Administration. What's going on in Maryland?
So much is going on in Maryland.
Small question.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's hard to summarize in a few sentences, but I think, the elevator pitch is just huge investments in restoring our system to what it needs to be, as well as expanding with the Purple Line outside of Washington, D.C. and Prince George and Montgomery County.
So I guess before we completely dive into what's going on at the MTA itself, I'd like for our listeners and myself as well to get to know you a little bit better. So I know your career has spanned consulting, planning at MTA, and now you're leading one of the nation's largest systems. What's prepared you most for your current role as administrator? That's
a tough question. I've had a lot of roles at MTA. I really did come up through the ranks. I started at the agency in 2012. Not as a bus operator, but I describe basically as the same thing. On the administration side, I was processing invoices. I would get 100-page invoices and go through page by page and write what grant they should be charged to. Being able to start at that level helped me to understand the agency in a way that maybe I wouldn't have otherwise coming in from the outside. So I think that's a really key piece, is just being able to understand the agency, understand how it functions, get that. I think having the planning background is also really key. I think leaders can come from any number of sectors, but I personally believe planners are really fantastic managers, because we're always looking, 10 steps ahead, always trying to understand, what should we be thinking about in the different areas and making sure we're kind of working towards that. And then the one other thing I always give a ton of credit for, so I grew up on a farm in Southeast Ohio, so there was not transit anywhere near where I grew up. But growing up on a farm, everybody has to pitch in. You have to get it done. When the hay needs to be done, there's a timeline on that, and you just got to get all the hay in. And I think that's really how I've approached my career the entire time. It's I'm not worried about, is this specifically my job or who needs to get it done? It's just let's focus, dive in, make sure that we're getting things done, make sure that we're tackling problems. And I think that people have kind of seen that from me throughout my career. So I really do attribute a lot of kind of the work ethic to really how I was raised in that farm girl background.
Well, it's definitely a unique trajectory.
It's your typical trajectory, right? Yeah. You grow up on a farm and you dive right into transit.
I think that's super interesting, because we've had so many different guests on, and they all kind of had their own unique, paths that led them to transit. Some obviously a lot more direct than others, but so many people have stories that might not originate on a farm, but still, let's say, less than, obvious transition from one to the other. So it's really fascinating to hear. I also think it puts you in an interesting spot, being that you have that level of experience. You weren't just VP and then became the administrator. You worked your way up. You were there for more than a decade now, and now you're leading that. And that's something that's a bit rare, I think, within transit as a whole, so many people do get kind of moved around to lead the next spot, but you have that really unique understanding of what MTA is and what MTA needs.
Yeah, I think having that perspective, right? Like, you know where the bodies are buried a little bit. It makes it easier when someone is presenting something to you to call BS on it, right? Because it's like, well, I did that job and I know when I did that job what the experience was. And so like, let's look at it in a different way, right? Like I am able to come in with that perspective. And I also did, my career trajectory was really through the administration side, planning, engineering, construction. Coming in as administrator, I got to know the operations side. So even though I was coming from an agency that I knew, an industry that I knew, operations was still pretty brand new to me. So I was able to come in that way and be the neutral third party of like, oh, I haven't dealt with union contracts before. And so like, let's dive in a new way that I haven't previously. So it's kind of both of those things. But I do think knowing the agency, knowing, kind of soup to nuts, like a lot of the history has been really helpful for me in navigating this role.
What does the MTA encompass? What services? How big is it? How many riders are we talking about?
So MTA is a statewide system. So we have service we consider kind of like the core modes that operate in the Baltimore region, which is our bus system. And bus is biggest for us. It does the kind of workhorse. 80% of our ridership is on our bus system. Yeah. We have a light rail system, metro, and a paratransit system, all in Baltimore. And then statewide, we offer commuter bus, and we're one of the larger commuter bus agencies in the country. And we have 3 commuter rail lines. There's one that's on the Northeast Corridor that goes up to Northern Maryland and then down into DC, one that kind of bounces between Baltimore and DC. And the Brunswick line actually goes from DC through Montgomery County, Maryland into West Virginia. Ridership wise, last year we did 68 million trips throughout the entire year. We're looking to exceed that this year. I think our ridership, depends on the month, was up anywhere between 5 and 10%. So we are seeing continued growth across all the modes.
Just for comparison, here at the MBTA, we do around, I believe, 245 million rides per year. And I think it's around 800,000 trips per weekday. While I was delving through the website and just learning more and more about the MTA, I saw that the MTA has its own Youth Transit Council, which tries to bring younger voices into the conversation. Why was that important to you as a leader? And what have you learned hearing directly from future generations that might resonate for even us here in Boston as we think about planning for the future?
Similar to here in Boston, I believe a lot of the public school students ride transit and use transit as their main way to get to and from school. And I have 2 kids. I have a 10-year-old and a 4-year-old, and I take them on the bus with me. They're not out there by themselves yet, but I am training my older daughter in particular to make sure that she knows how to use the system whenever it's kind of her turn. The feedback that we were getting from students is they didn't feel like their voices were being heard, both in like just traditional day-to-day, what was going on, and then also long-term planning. We're in the planning process right now for the Baltimore Red Line. That project has been relaunched. That is going to be a generational investment in the transit system in Baltimore. And, the students who are riding today are the ones who are going to be riding in 10, 15 years from now. And so I want to make sure that their voices are heard as we're developing this program and as we're developing this line. So we're now in our 3rd year of the YTC. It's been really fantastic to get some of the feedback from them. I think one of the biggest things that we learned is, even though we think kids are on social media all the time, right? Like everyone's got to be on TikTok and everyone's got to have the cool Instagram reels. The reality is the kids told us, like, we're not going to follow you. Like it doesn't like you're
breaking my heart.
You're the MTA. Yeah. Maybe our parents will, right? So that's a way to get in. But they provided some feedback in terms of like, come talk to us. And so we're doing more in-person outreach in a way that we haven't in the past. So this year, basically every back to school night, we are in person talking to kids, helping them to understand what their route looks like. So we've changed that kind of perspective. The other thing that we're really trying to make sure we're changing, and we're not there yet, is just how we talk about things and how we talk about our projects. And I think this podcast is one opportunity for you guys to dive deeper.
Yeah.
But in transit, we talk in acronyms and we talk in a language that only we understand sometimes.
Big learning curve.
I am super guilty of it. And so, hearing from the kids, they took a look at some of our materials, our outreach materials for the Red Line, and reworked them. and rework them in a pretty significant way that made it easier for them to understand. And then that makes it easier for everybody to understand. So I think it's been a good program for us. Having more student voices is something we want to continue to expand so that they can understand, help us do better messaging, and then also really kind of leading into the pipeline for careers. Because that's the other thing is like they love seeing behind the scenes. I've had so many of them say, I want to come work at MTA. And it's like, yes, when you graduate, like come back, see me, and we'll find you a job.
It's great to have that level of involvement, but again, it's the level of feedback and the commitment to hearing people out. Because I know we do have conversations with schools and we have, in-person events, but to actually have that formal council, to have a more durable relationship with students, I can see that being extraordinarily fascinating, but also just informative for everything from service planning to the communication piece. I mean, as you're saying this, I'm like, yeah, let's absolutely do that here because, it's all about who your audience is and how you're able to reach them. I know that MTA has recently released its Customer Experience Action Plan, and it lays out near-term initiatives shaped by rider feedback. So I imagine even things that are shared with you by the Youth Council are also going to be within this. And it includes everything from improving real-time information and signage to strengthening safety and cleanliness. How does this plan guide what your near-term strategy is? So you have this kind of playbook in front of you, you have the feedback. What's your next step?
The customer experience plan, so it really just guides and is our to-do list for the next year, essentially. So we started our customer experience team about 2 years ago. MTA has really been, I would say, advanced with using data to drive our decisions, to drive our route planning, to drive a lot of what we do at the agency. But some of the pieces that we were missing was almost like the anecdotal piece, right? So we don't want to be only anecdotal driven. We don't want to be only data driven. And we're trying to marry the two. So we hired our first rider experience director. And so she and her team have been out there talking to the riders. And that is really essentially what has driven the plan. The goal of it is being incredibly action-oriented and achievable. So many times what I've seen from MTA, and I'm guilty of it as a planner, is that we put things in there of like, this is an aspirational thing. It's not funded. We'd like to do it. And that's great. But the reality is that it's just a plan that sits on a shelf. And so the customer experience plan, it's funded, it's achievable, it can happen in the next year. Some of it is process things that are just like easy for us to do. Some of it is, some changes that we need to make to our contracts. But it really is helping us to kind of guide, these are specific things will happen in the next year. There's other things that we're thinking about already and starting to work on that would happen in year 2 and year 3, but we want to be sure when we put these in the plan that these are real things that our customers can count on, because we're trying to build that trust that if we say we're going to do something, we do it, we deliver it, and we show that we've delivered.
And it's focusing on what is actually achievable versus what might just be a nice dream, but doesn't really have any funding or resources to get off the ground.
Yeah. Again, I'm a planner. Great plans are fantastic and can be driving forces. But at the same time, sometimes we lose trust with the public when we have plan after plan after plan that we just don't deliver on. And so we're trying to kind of change that narrative of, yes, we can think big and we can think aspirationally, but we also can just be really realistic and deliver some real huge benefits to our riders in the short term.
How do you think Boston could take inspiration from this and strengthening our own customer experience initiatives?
I think you guys already do a fantastic job. This podcast, again, a good example.
I was fishing for a compliment.
Yeah,
no, just kidding.
But we're listening to riders, talking directly with riders. I think, we look around the industry and the T is one that we look to for some of the things that you've been able to achieve. In terms of like the customer feedback from what I've seen in terms of cleanliness and reliability, like those are huge changes that you've been able to make. Same thing with frequency. So I think, again, you're kind of already doing it. It's listening to our riders and delivering on what they say that they want, which honestly, more often than not, is fast, frequent, reliable service that is safe.
I know you're also in the middle of another change, this being with phasing out the Charm card and moving completely to the Charm Pass. So I know it's already, from my understanding, the pass has been out, but now it's like, okay, everybody say goodbye to the card. We're moving forward. And it reminds me of what we're experiencing here. So we have our Charlie card. We had our Charlie ticket. Now it's tappable. So that was one evolution. We have Tap to Ride, which is kind of our newest evolution last summer. We can pay with your smartphone, smartwatch, what have you. But I think you're a little ahead of us with the app piece, which is not too far off in the horizon for us. I know you all have already launched that. And how is that going? What has that experience been like? Are people excited to have the app, or do you have the diehards that want that physical fair media? What's going on there? And then again, what advice do you have for us? Is because we're right around the corner from the same spot.
Yeah, no, all of the above. And I have to say, I love that you guys have the tap to ride. I use that on the way down here, and I thought
very helpful for tourists and those visiting. Absolutely.
Honestly, I mean, as much as I love having all the different transit cards,
of course.
I also just like being able to.
We'll get you a Charlie card.
Pay with my phone. I mean, so I think right in that area, you guys are ahead of us. That's where I want to be, is to be able to be in that kind of open payment area, so folks can use their credit card or phone to get on. We launched our app several years ago. I will say it has been incredibly popular. It's still, I think, one of like the highest rated apps that our vendor has.
Oh, wow.
So yes, a ton of really positive feedback that we've got from our riders. We also have seen year over year just continued growth as more and more people adopt it. And it's really fun when I'm on Reddit and I see someone say like, oh, how do I get there? And someone says, download the Charm Pass. It's so great. So it kind of does its own advertising. That said, there are definitely still diehards who are all in on the Charm card, and there is simplicity to that.
Yeah, of course.
Right? You don't have to worry about your phone dying. You don't have to write any of those things. If you don't have a phone, you lose your phone. So I definitely understand that, and I think that's why for us, getting into the tap to go, tap and ride, whatever you want to call it, is the way to move forward, so that we have all of those options for people. But I think the biggest thing is, again, just trying to be transparent about the why behind it, is, where we're going, why we're going that way, making sure that we're laying out the game plan to let people know that, okay, yes, being able to pay with your credit card is coming, and putting some time frames on that as well.
And Charm Pass allows you to pay your fare across all modes.
Yep. So it's good for all of our modes, even for folks who have the discounted fares. You can do it through that. We also only do free transfers if you use the Charm Pass. So that is one kind of motivation. Yep. And we just extended it to 2 hours. So making sure that folks know if they want to use it, it gives a ton of freedom and flexibility. We also have a few Fare Pass products that are also only available on Charm Pass. Charm Flex, we call it. So if you're only coming back to work for 3 days, we have a 3-day pass that's slightly discounted. We have a 6-ride pass that's slightly discounted. So trying to kind of recognize some of those things. So I think, if I have to give advice, add those little carrots, right? To make it that something that people want to use, and it's a better deal for them, helps to get them to download it.
Makes a lot of sense. We do have an app for our commuter rail services called M-Ticket, and it does have things like our 5-day Flex Pass, which is very similar, but there's a little bit of a separation, at least for now, until we have our future fare system, between our commuter rail lines and ferry, as well as then subway and bus. So definitely something to aspire to have that ease of use, not have to have multiple apps, not make sure one app is topped off and the other one isn't, or anything to like.
Yeah, no, on the app side, that definitely makes sense. That was one downside for us with the Charm card, is it didn't work on Mark and Commuter Bus. So being able to have just the app where it works everywhere is definitely really key.
In addition to the technological changes that are going on with MTA, you also have some infrastructure changes going on. The biggest one, by many definitions, would be the Purple Line, which I believe is the nation's largest public-private partnership, or transit project at least. How does that model move that project forward? What has that process been like? And is there something there as far as a lesson that Boston might look to for future mega projects with something of that nature?
I will say, the Moore administration in particular, which our Governor Moore, has really been focused on investing in transit and transportation across Maryland. A ton of just helping us to get back to where we need to go, and making sure that we're continuing to invest in the Purple Line. It is the largest transit P3 in the country. It is 80% complete at this point. We're getting a rail vehicle every week. So I'll say, wow. I think today it's 18. By the time you guys air this, it will be even more. So it's really exciting to see the progress that's been made there. The P3 model and that project in particular has experienced some challenges. Yep. I will say where we are today and my involvement in the project, I came into this role in 2021. We were kind of midway between where the previous design build contractor had left and the new design builder was being brought on. So it's almost like a little bit of a reset for the project. The new design builder and the team has really been fantastic in driving the project forward. And if I had to give any advice, I would say that it's not looking at it like a P3, it truly is a partnership, right? Yep. It's right there in the name, is that we all have to make sure we're continuing to think of it as project first. So it is not MTA versus the concessionaire versus the design builder. We're all working together to try and identify how we can deliver the project as quickly as possible, obviously within the constraints of the contract. And so, we have executive meetings every 2 weeks where the highest levels of MTA, of MDOT, our secretary is there, and of the concessionaire so that we can work out problems, that we can continue to advance the project. On the MTA side, we've worked with our counterparts at State Highway Administration, and we've done some things that, they weren't willing to do in the past, where we would say, and instead of taking one lane for 6 months, let's just shut down the entire intersection and get in and out in a weekend. And so thinking about how those specific things, how we do it differently. But I think overall, it's how do we put the project first and deliver the project as quickly as we can?
And what's feedback been like so far for this? And this is, as you said, this is underway. This, I think, opens in 2027, if I remember correctly.
We are on track for late 2027. That said, systems integration for any transit person.
Fair enough.
You're laughing. You never know what you're going to get into. And we're still getting into that phase, but that we're still on track for that. Yeah, I think the feedback from the public, I will say now they're starting to get really excited about it because it feels more and more real.
Yeah.
I will say there for a while, I think everyone just thought we were moving dirt. And my advice, anytime you're moving or, kind of doing that major early construction, as much as you can to identify what's actually happening and the timeline around it, because it does just feel like you're moving dirt back and forth. And there's nothing physical for anyone to see. But now that we have, tracks are 70% complete, overall project 80% complete, there's stations, there's trains, people are really getting excited for it to open.
In addition to that, not that that's not enough, but I know there's the MARC Growth and Transformation Plan. And this sounds somewhat similar to what we're doing here as far as our aspiration of regional rail. Knowing that there was such a shift in transit patterns following COVID with more flexible schedules, more infrequent days or what have you, it seeks to provide more all-day service. Mm-hmm. Tell us a little bit about that and how that's going and what that looks like in Maryland.
You guys have really done a fantastic job with ridership growth by some of the changes that you've made here to make those adjustments. And that's kind of what we are looking to do exactly, is recognizing that it's more of a regional rail model, and the MARC Growth and Transformation Plan is identifying how we can get there. So it's all day, two-way, frequent transit on our rail lines. Unfortunately for us, it's built into the name. It's the Maryland Area Rail Commuter. It's how do we rethink that? Rebrand the name. Yes, to really think more regionally and think more how do we get people on weekends, midday, late night. There's a ton of opportunities there. So the Growth and Transformation Plan for us, we've done several versions of this plan. It's been called several different things: the Growth and Investment Plan, the Cornerstone Plan. What we're trying to do with this one is, again, be a little bit more realistic about what we have funded and what we think is achievable in 5 years, in 15 years. And then there is an aspirational part, right? If we have unlimited funding or, more funding, what can we achieve and in what time frame with that? And making it clear to folks what different investments unlock for us in terms of level of service. So I think the Brunswick line, the one I mentioned before that goes from DC out to Montgomery County into West Virginia, right now it only operates in the mornings, out in the afternoons. I think we have one Friday afternoon, 1:00 train if you want to sneak out early. But it's an area where we see a ton of growth and a ton of opportunity, especially late night and midday services. It's owned by CSX, so we do get to work with CSX as the railroad owner. But what we're trying to do in the plan is lay out specifically these investments for CSX help us to unlock additional service and kind of get people rallying around those different investment points so that we can make the case that this is a needed investment in trying to get us there.
And you've already seen a pretty sizable growth in ridership. It was 50%, I believe.
Yes, we've seen huge ridership growth over the past year for MARC.
That's massive.
In particular. I think a lot of return to office is driving that. But even before that, we were seeing huge growth in weekends and midday, which again, I think aligns with what people are seeing across the country and here in Boston is people want to ride transit. It's just not available when they want to. And so how do we make those investments to make that an option?
That's been a huge area of opportunity for us. I know Our commuter rail has bounced back quite well. It's in the high 90%, but the weekend service is like 150%. I mean, it is every time I take the commuter rail on the weekends and it is always packed. And we're seeing the same trend even with our ferry service where, we do have our kind of in and out morning and afternoon because we have a model where we share our boats with whale watches and other New Englandy things. But on the weekends, we have more all day service and it is a wonderful way to get to the city. But, seeing that surge on the weekends where, previously it was, peak hours, 9 o'clock and 5 o'clock during the week and everything else was just kind of an afterthought. It has been a seismic shift in kind of transit priorities to meet the new patterns and behaviors of our riders. And bring new people on board.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a huge opportunity to bring new people. They do it on the weekend. They're like, hey, I could do this. I could try it out. No, I think absolutely huge opportunity and something that trying to meet that need fast enough is really the goal for all of us.
Another similarity between Boston and the MTA that I was reading about is the light rail modernization program. So just earlier this year, we unveiled a mock-up of our brand new Type 10s, which will be coming in the coming years. But again, it's that step in a new direction for accessibility, for safety, for frequency, for capacity, which is another big thing that we're planning for. What is your light rail system looking like? What is this investment in this modernization program? What does that look like for you?
MTA's light rail opened in April 2nd, 1992. They rushed to get it done for the first game at Camden Yards. And so, made decisions to get it open, that sometimes we're still kind of dealing with those today. But it did get open. It is a 30-mile line that goes from Hunt Valley in the northern part of Baltimore County all the way down to the BWI airport. So it is direct to the airport. You can get off the train, walk a few steps, and you're in the airport, which is such a fantastic option for folks in Baltimore. It's been open for, since 1992, and we have not made any real major investments in the system. The vehicles got overhauled a couple years ago, but they're still 30 plus years old. We have reliability issues. We have breakdown issues. Again, I think similar things with the investments.
I've heard of problems like these before.
You guys are making those investments, right? So I'm making those investments to get there. But for us, it's, we have these huge old high floor vehicles that the train comes right through downtown Baltimore on Howard Street. And it is imposing. Like it does not fit the environment. It is just this gigantic vehicle. You have to go up a high block. The operator has to come out of their cab and put down a ramp for you to get on. So anyone with a stroller or a wheelchair, it's just incredibly inefficient for them. And folks don't want to use it in that way. So I'm so excited about this investment. It is really a generational investment. And so what we're going to do is get new vehicles, get a new signal system. All of the stations will be touched so that we can get rid of those high blocks and expand the system so you can just kind of roll on and off or walk on and off to the low floor vehicles. And then we're also making investments in the kind of behind the scenes, the electrical system, so our traction power substation.
Again, very similar.
Yep. Yes. So these huge investments to improve the reliability of the system. And what we're going to see, in the weeds, nerdy stuff, but the electrical system hampers us quite a bit.
Yeah.
Like we have a guy who sits in one of our substations during the Ravens games and is ready to push a button to restart if we overload the system.
Oh, wow.
That's where we're at.
Yeah.
And so we're trying to get to the point where
you don't need a guy to push a button.
I don't need the guy. We can have that guy doing other things and focusing on that. And beyond that, it's going to improve our travel time. So we're looking at, potentially 20% travel time savings.
That's huge.
Being able to do 7.5-minute headways. Right now, off peak, we're 15 minutes.
So
and there's two branches.
Massive,
There's two branches at the southern end, which means that the airport service is only every 30 minutes, which is just, right? Like you cringe. So we want to improve the frequency of that service. And so that's what this investment allows us to do. It's, over $1 billion. Governor Moore and the General Assembly passed a budget package this past session that allowed us to do that. And so we're so excited about it.
So it sounds like there's a lot of amazing things happening, a lot of similarities between what's happening in Maryland, what's happening here in Boston. I know something that is also similar for not just Maryland, Boston, but truthfully public transit as a whole is always the funding issue. I took a look over the capital needs inventory, and I think it highlighted around $14 billion in assets. And what it would take to keep everything in a state of good repair. I think 90% of that was funded.
Yes.
So huge. That means things, as you were talking about earlier, things that can actually happen.
Yes.
How do you balance, I suppose, the near term and the long term when you're looking at this? Because again, we've had to deal with infrastructure issues. It's no secret. And, it's an ongoing process for our system to be in a state of good repair. So how do you, I guess, balance that budget and what the priorities are in the near and long term to keep Maryland running?
I mean, I think you nailed it when you highlighted, transit generally across the country, right? Like there's always these stories. And I think, a lot of cases we invested in these systems and then didn't necessarily plan for the fact that we had to keep investing in the systems to keep them running. And, so many of us are dealing with that backlog and making sure that we can get out of it. I think for us being able to fund it and the priority piece, our funding comes from the state and the federal government. Like we're funded in that area. Again, we have a governor who's incredibly supportive, which is really helpful. But documents like the capital needs inventory have helped us to make the case, to make it clear for folks to understand, hey, this is why we're investing. This is why it matters. We've also had some times when I'm just thrilled about the light rail modernization program, but a year ago we were in a spot where I didn't think we could fund it. And so, making sure that folks understood the reality of if we don't have the funding to do this, if we don't pass a revenue package in the General Assembly, the federal money that we got will likely go away. And so, we were able to kind of build the case and make sure we're prioritizing that and kind of getting everyone on board. There's so many needs, there's so many wants, there's so many desires. Where we're at right now is just we have to show that we're a good bet and show that we're a good investment and show that we can deliver on the projects that are promised. And, when your light rail trains are breaking down frequently or we have to shut down the system for 2 weeks, like it makes it hard for people to want to invest. And so that's kind of really where we're at right now is prioritizing, showing that like, look, we can do this. We know how to do it. We know how to invest. And once people see that it works and it's good, trying to then push for more.
So we too are fortunate to have a governor who is very much pro-transit. But the reality is there's always, that looming fiscal cliff. We are, obviously really thankful for the support that we get from them, from the legislature. We have averted most of our financial constraints for operating, not for the dream pile quite yet. But the arguments still persist. There are still peer agencies. I think my mind goes straight to SEPTA, where the finances are a lot tighter, services being cut. And again, we were in that same boat not too long ago. What arguments do you make to riders, to policymakers, taxpayers, what have you, to really make those sustainable transit investments?
I mean, it's tough.
It is. Right? It's a big one, yeah.
And especially when you look around the country and see, my heart goes out to SEPTA in particular, being another Northeast Corridor city. I mean, so one of the things that we did this past session, because it was, we were looking at the case where I wouldn't be sitting here ready to advertise the light rail program. And, we needed to get folks with us to pass a budget package. So obviously being spearheaded by the governor was very helpful. But the way it works for Maryland in the General Assembly is you can testify on behalf of an agency's budget. And I was really impressed. I reached out to local hospitals, local schools, the students on Youth Transit Council to help us make the case. We had 30 plus people basically take a day out of their life to come down and testify on behalf of MTA, on behalf of the need to fund our budget. And I think what resonated the most is, I think the students in particular, making sure that kids can get to school. Like that's an argument that a lot of people understand and buy. But beyond that, I think a lot of the employers, right? Like having the hospitals, and it was multiple hospitals sitting there with us saying, if MTA doesn't run, my workers can't get here. My nurses can't get here. My doctors can't get here. It was really impactful and meaningful, and I think went a long way. I think we have to keep making the argument, and we have to keep making it every single day and, keep showing up for our riders so that they will also show up for us.
What larger trends are you seeing in public transportation? So if you zoom out even beyond Maryland, beyond Boston, I know some places exist beyond there, I suppose. What are you seeing in the industry for other states? What are the common problems or the common areas for growth?
Yeah, I mean, it's really great when we get to talk with other transit agencies and conversations like this. There are so many things that I think we're all dealing with that are, similar, slightly different. Every, agency has their own issues. I think by and large, it's making sure that the funding is there to deliver on the operations and to make sure that we can maintain the investments that we have made. So I'm seeing that quite a bit in the focus on, the state of good repair. Again, I think especially up and down the Northeast Corridor, that is a slightly older system. Yep, that is a very real thing that we're all dealing with. And then I think also just, again, the changes in ridership trends and making sure that we can make the adjustments to meet them and making sure that the funding is there so that we can make the adjustments, right? So it's like we all have to be kind of working collectively to make the argument for that. I'm in town for the APTA conference. I think they do a good job of highlighting the benefits of transit beyond just our riders, right? Like the jobs that are created, the economic development that's created, and the narrative that goes with that. I think is really important to make sure that we're all kind of singing that same tune.
I saw something, I think it was it for every $1 in transit, it's $5?
$5. Yep. I talked about that a lot. No, and we've seen it in Maryland as well, real on the ground jobs. Like we've done some mapping that shows Kenora Brake is actually located in Maryland. And so they're in a county where people are not necessarily going to be riding MTA services, but because MTA is buying brake pads from them, like it's a benefit into the economy in Maryland. We just opened up the Hitachi plant in Hagerstown, Maryland. That's 500 jobs that are existing to build rail cars because MTA is having their rail cars done there. WMATA is having our rail cars done there. And so huge investments that are being made.
On that note, what gives you the most optimism about the future of transit in Maryland?
I think sitting here today, I'm most excited about the environment that we have where folks have recognized the value of transit and recognize that they need to fight for it and are showing up continually to make sure that they're supporting the agency and make sure that they're fighting for it. Beyond that, on the infrastructure side, again, like there's so many things to be excited about and to nerd about. We're getting new vehicles on all of our systems. The Purple Line is making tremendous progress. And I think the other piece for me is just the employees. I'm sure it's the same here at the T, but we have so many employees who show up every day, who go above and beyond, who are dedicated. Anytime I put out a call of like, hey, I need volunteers to come out and help our riders, I'll get our accountants out there. I'll get our grant people out there. Like they show up and they show up for our riders day after day. And, that helps me to get out of the bed in the morning because I want to make sure that I'm showing up for them.
Now, if you could leave MBTA riders or even our leaders with one piece of advice from your experience, what would it be?
No, I think, again, you've got a great system here. Right? You've got really great bones. And so making sure that we're investing in keeping it going and, keep beating the drum for more and better transit.
Awesome. Well, I'm definitely going to have to make a trip down to Maryland to check out all the great things that are happening there. Maybe I'll swing by for the Purple Line opening or something. But Holly, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today and discuss the similarities between the systems and kind of the ongoing fight for public transit.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. We'll get you a crab cake.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Spilling the Tea. A special thanks to Holly Arnold for reminding us that whether you're in Baltimore or Boston, transit is central to how communities grow and thrive. If you have feedback or ideas for future episodes, we'd love to hear from you. Email us at social@mbta.com. Until next time, I'm Andrew Cassidy, and this has been Spilling the Tea.